Hola clase. In this unit, we will be looking at the verb gustar and similar verbs. These are verbs that take indirect object pronouns, but unlike the ones we studied in the previous unit, these verbs also reverse the order of the subject and object. So, as you can see in this concept, most of the verbs that we've studied in our Spanish study so far, Spanish 101 and beginning of 102, follow this structure, which is subject, verb, object. For instance, yo estudio lenguas, or mi amigo trabaja en Target, por ejemplo. However, there's a category of verbs that reverses that natural order. And we have many of them in English. For instance, to matter. You could say, international affairs matter to me. There, we're saying that something matters, right? And gustar in Spanish works the same way. The only thing tricky about gustar is that it translates in English to one of these verbs, but structurally, it's one of these reversed verbs. So we say, for instance, the news interests me, or the pandemic worries us. ¿Está bien? Nos preocupa la pandemia. So both languages have many of these verbs. The only tricky thing, I'll repeat, is that the verb gustar is this type, but the verb to like is this other type. So making that mental gymnastics when you want to say something in Spanish and you're thinking in English is what's difficult. The concept itself is not, and the fact that both languages have numerous of the verbs of this type is an indication that it's not a difficult structure in and of itself. So the two things to remember is that you need the indirect object pronoun that you've studied before, and this indirect object pronoun identifies to whom something matters, to whom something is pleasing, etc., to whom something is boring, and then the list of verbs. These are some of the verbs in Spanish that we use with these pronouns. And again, we've highlighted gustar and no gustar because they're a different type of verb in English. Bien, but you can see the others are very similar. So, for instance, interesar. You could say, me interesa la lingüística. Linguistics interests me. Bien. Another way we work around that in English, we can say to be interested in, right? I could say I'm interested in linguistics. But the structure itself is to say that linguistics interests me. We looked at this already with the verb doler when we studied body parts and health earlier in this module. Me duele la mano. So my hand hurts to me, correcto? En inglés decimos simply my hand hurts. Bien, my hand hurts. Me duele la mano. Here are some examples that you can look at. ¿Qué te aburre? What bores you? ¿Qué le preocupa a Daniela? What worries Daniela? Etc. Another note that we want to mention is that we often use a prepositional phrase with a, that is a with me to indicate me. For instance, a mí me gusta, a ti te gusta, a él le gusta, a ella le gusta, etc. This is very common to identify to whom the indirect object pronoun refers by including a prepositional phrase with a mí, a ti. In third person, you could also replace él, ella with a name, a Marcos, a Graciela, a María, a Ernesto, etc. Bien, a little bit further explanation of the verb gustar, which I kind of mentioned already further up, some examples. And then we wanted to remind you that even though we're looking at this verb in the context of present tense, me gusta, te gusta, it's true in all tenses. And you've already studied a number of tenses. In formal future, you've studied preterite, And the same structure holds true regardless of the tense that you're working with. So we could say, me gustó la cena, me encantó el restaurante, no me extrañó, using all preterite. Same structure, only the tense of the verb has changed. Bien, a few exercises in this unit for you to practice. Learn them on Quizlet, and then do these activities. Bien, hasta luego clase, buena suerte.